Hello, welcome to the third presentation in Unit 1. At this point, you should have read Chapter 1 of the text, which gave you an introduction to the book, and you also, prior to that, should have watched the first content video for the unit, the one titled What is Theory? In this very brief presentation, I just want to introduce you to correspondence theories, behaviorist theories, and information processing theories, and finally stage theories of word recognition and spelling development. These are the theories that are covered in Chapter 2 of the text. So, when we're talking about correspondence theories, one of the things you might ask is correspondence to what? What does this even mean? So, in a nutshell, correspondence theories assume that there's a direct correspondence or a match between things and events or phenomena that are out there in the world, whether it's the pillow that is next to me on my couch, or a pencil in your hand, or a dog, or text on a page, right? That there's a direct correspondence between those things out there in the world and people's representations of those things and events. So, for example, if there's a dog says woof, those are a couple of things out there in the world, right? And a boy who sees that points and says dog, right? The idea in terms of correspondence theories is that what is out here in the world and the representation, in this case, what the boy says, dog, or there might be a different representation, right? Like might write the word dog or draw a picture of a dog or whatever, that those things will match up, right? And that the more a child develops or the better that they get at this, the more accurate their representations will be in terms of that correspondence, okay? So in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about correspondence theories. And in the chapter, it'll go into just a little bit more depth about that. So here are some key assumptions that you'll read about in the chapter, right? So this is just a little bit of a preview. The idea with correspondence theories, or a key epistemological assumption behind it, is objectivism. Really the idea that meaning is inherent in the object itself or in a particular phenomenon. So learning about a thing in this case wouldn't be a subjective process, right? The thing is what it is. A dog is a dog is a dog, right? Another assumption is that learning is a linear process of accumulating skills, right? That you start with the little bits and build up to more meaning, right? That's a hard one to connect to the dog itself, but maybe if you see, the dog has a tail, there are certain paws, there's fur, there are, ears, and it says woof, right? If you learn each of those individual things, then you will be able to identify a dog. Another assumption is that learning processes are universal. What I mean by that is that they're the same for everyone. And if everyone learns in the same way, right, then curriculum materials could be the same for everyone. And so this is where the idea comes from that we can compare students along a standard. And this is also the idea behind standardized curricula. With regard to teaching and learning, the key assumptions of correspondence theories are that a reader understands the text if she can recall or reproduce the information in the text so that it matches exactly what the text says, okay? With regard to spelling, a writer's spelling should match the text or the ideal or correct form. It should correspond to it, okay? So let's go into the three theories really briefly, and we're going to do this with some fun graphics, okay? So behaviorism, information processing, and stage theories. All right, so behaviorism. So behaviorists believe that we only know that learning has occurred when we have sense data that tells us so. Sense data meaning we can see it, we can hear it. Think about your five senses, right? You can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can feel it. Right? So the idea here is that a learner's behavior or their response should correspond to the stimulus. All right? So stimulus and response, you've probably heard that term before. You may have heard of Pavlov's dogs. That's all behaviorist, right? So let's take the boy and the dog. The dog The boy sees the dog. There's some sense data there, right? The dog says woof, and the boy hears it. So there's that stimuli. And so what the boy does is the boy then says, dog. And that response is considered a response that corresponds to the stimulus or to what is out there in the world. Okay? So, well-known, famous behaviorist John B. Watson might say, by Job, he's got it. He said it, so he's got it. The he said it part gets at that sense data. As a teacher, you know he gets it because he said it, right? Behaviorists are concerned with observable behaviors. That's how they know, or they think they know, that learning has occurred. Okay? All right, let's move on to information processing. Still playing with this idea of the boy and the dog. Okay? All right, information processing theorists don't reject the notion of stimulus and response, right? They still think, well, yeah, there are stimuli out there in the world, and people respond to them. However, what they think is most interesting, and I can see I have a little typo there, sorry. This does not correspond to the standard. Sorry about that. But information processing theorists believe that the most interesting things about learning are the things that you can't observe. They're the things that happen behind the eyeballs. They're interested in how the brain processes the information that it receives, right? So you've got this boy, you've got the dog, this is woof, stimuli, and the boy says dog. That's his response. Okay, cool. But the cognitive psychologist, right? And in this case, we have David Rumelhart, very well known in the field of cognitive psychology and reading. David Rumelhart would say, yeah, he got it. I wonder what just happened in his brain. And David Rumelhart is very famous. You'll read about this in chapter 2. He created some very, very influential and well-known models of information processing that have been very influential in the field of reading. And what he really tried to do was to model that process of what's happening in the brain during the process of reading or processing text. Okay? So that's information processing theories. Now, in chapter 2, you'll read about more than just Rumelhart's model. And just be prepared. The models, if you've already flipped through that chapter, you're going to see that there's some crazy looking visuals and models of information processing. I don't want you to get too hung up in the specific details of each model. I more want to give you a sense in that chapter of the variety of models and the complexity of them and how they've contributed, how they've morphed over the years and how they've contributed to what we know about the reading process. All right, so let's go on to stage theories, which are much narrower actually than information processing and behaviorist theories. Stage theories are really focusing on spelling and word recognition. So stage theories and stage models or those who subscribe to them, view learning to read and write as a developmental process. So stage theorists are interested in understanding in particular young readers, stages of alphabetic knowledge that they move through. So it's really focused on development. It's grounded very much in some of those information processing theorists, but they're rather more focused on that process of change over time or development as readers grow and as they develop alphabetic knowledge, right? So let's take the idea of the dog and the boy, okay? So the dog says woof and the boy is pointing. So we still have those stimuli and we have the response, but the stage theorists aren't so much interested in the relationship between stimulus and response. They're a little bit more interested just in that response and how a learner's response might change over time. And at a certain stage, which you'll read about in the chapter, right? A boy might write dog like that, right? As he says dog. And so let's take Linea Airy. Linea Airy, very well-known reading psychologist and stage theorist, right? Linnea Airy would probably say something like, in response to the boy, might say, "Okay, now stretch it out. What sounds do you hear?" One of the things that Linnea Airy has done in her work is to really think about not just about stage models, but what are some of the prompts? What are some of the ways that you can promote learners' development along a linear series of stages in terms of alphabetic knowledge. And this might be for those of you who teach early childhood, anywhere in sort of pre-K, but in particular K through 2, maybe 3rd grade. This is going to sound very familiar to you. And so anytime that you're really thinking about word study and alphabetic knowledge and things like that, you're probably animating some of these stage theories. So that's it. I hope that this very short presentation has been helpful to you. I'm hoping that this supports your reading of Chapter 1. Have fun.